Jason Timpf, a frequent guest of Combos Court. What is the vibes, my man? How are you?
I'm doing good. I can't complain. I'm excited to be kind of on the tail end of this playoff grind. This final schedule's not too bad. Every third night, like we do our little film session the day after and a mailbag, but then I take a day off before the next game. It's been kind of nice, and then I'm starting to plan my vacations for the summer. So I'm starting to. It's been a crazy couple of months, and I know I've put my wife through hell, but I'm ready to relax and enjoy it over the summer. You coming to Summer League this year?
I will be there. Will you be there?
Dude, we got to link up this year. We got to make it
we
happen.
have to.
Can we hoop? Can we hoop this Summer League?
We can hoop.
Let's make it happen. Let's make it happen.
We got to hoop. We got to record. We got to figure out everything, Jason. But all right, two things could be true. Mavs fans should be concerned, but losing the first two games, especially on the road, is not exactly a death sentence. Did you see the Mavs learn anything or anything they could take away from these first two games?
So I am a little bit more optimistic about Dallas's chances than where I was with Minnesota after going down 2-0. And the main reason why is like when I see a team that's trailing in a series, I'm looking for things that they can flip, like dynamics that they can change, right? Like for instance, in the Denver-Minnesota series, Denver was struggling with very basic things like just getting the ball up the floor against ball pressure or like setting a good screen to free up a perimeter player. And so when they went into game 3 and they just did those things better, they were able to kind of free things up for their offense. And then Jamal Murray got going and then everything kind of trickled down, right? What scares me for Dallas is I see two problems that I don't think they can necessarily fix. One, I don't think they can just do a better job of containing the basketball. It's a mismatch. The Boston just has so many guys that can beat people off the dribble and so many different entry points that they can attack with Dallas. It's not just Luka, and Luka is going to be the primary story. And for the record, there's a conversation I would imagine we'll probably have it today surrounding Luka's ability to keep people in front off the dribble and how that's an issue. But it's not just him. Like, yeah, I'm seeing PJ Washington get beat straight up. I'm seeing Daniel Gafford get hunted a lot in some switches. They're really struggling to contain the basketball. I don't know that that's something they can fix. There's a perimeter speed, I should say a depth of perimeter speed mismatch. Like Dallas is really good at the top on the perimeter. Like Derek Jones is really good. Kyrie's not a bad secondary guy there, but like they just don't have a ton of it. And then on the other end of the floor, I thought there was a play last night that I thought was the dead giveaway. Transition cross match. Tatum ends up on Derek Jones Jr. in the left corner. And as a result, Horford ended up on Lively. And so Luka immediately brought him up into a ball screen. Lively set the screen. Luka came down, engaged Horford, hit a pocket pass to Lively, and Lively dunked all over Derek White with a two-handed
That
dunk.
was nasty. And then...
Yeah. It just did the head tap after. Yeah. So like that's how easy it is for Dallas to score in ball screens when they have their center matched up with your center, because then it mimics traditional 4-out spacing. So you have two guys in the corners, right? You have two shooters in the corners, shooter on the opposite wing, guy comes up and sets the ball screen. You're both working downhill against an empty paint, right? And in that case, your low man is Derek White, who's just not nearly big enough to do anything to Lively coming downhill. When Boston is in their traditional matchups, when it's not a transition push ahead like that, they'll have Tatum matched up with Derek Lively. And then they'll just switch that ball screen to shut it down. Or if Luka wants to bring Derek Jones into the screen to target Horford, it's the same dynamic except for three differences. Derek Jones is not as good a vertical spacer as Derek Lively. He's not
bad, not bad though, but not as
not
good.
Not bad. Yeah, one of our favorite leapers in the history of the game. But yeah, and then he when he pops to the 3-point line, he's not a great above the break 3-point shooter.
True.
And then the third piece of it is now instead of that ball screen, let's imagine Luka and Derek Jones kind of working downhill in the ball screen. Instead of it being against a vacant paint, Tatum and Lively are parked right underneath the basket, which just kind of janks up the spacing. And that has been the main dynamic that I think has affected them. I don't know if you saw the numbers that I tweeted out last night, but I'll pull them up real quick. But like spot up opportunities to me are the best indicator of like whether or not you're getting a defense in rotation, like engaging help defenders, right? And the numbers are like absolutely crazy. So in game 1, Dallas only generated 12 spot up opportunities. Boston generated 34. Game 2, Dallas only generated 16 and Boston generated 34 again. So we're at 68 to 28 in spot up opportunities through 2 games. And because that's Boston is engaging help, making kick out passes. On the other end of the floor, Dallas has not been able to bring additional defenders. Boston has been able to guard their ball screens effectively 3-on-3 with Tatum and Lively underneath the basket and kind of contain their pick and roll attack. The other problem there too is it's putting Dallas into a situation where they're ISOing a ton.
Yeah.
And with those ISOs, they're not effective. 0.54 points per possession, including passes in game 1. That's horrific. 0.79 in game 2, also bad, even though if it's a little better. So I don't, you tell me, Combo, like, is there something that they can flip? Like, I know Kyrie can play better and Luka can play better, but
Yeah.
I don't know how they get the role players going unless they start finding an opening for those spot up opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a huge minimization of lobs and threes for some reason. Is that more Dallas not getting into their offense, or Boston just taking away everything? Because you can't take away everything, right? Especially with 2 scorers as great as Luka and Kyrie. But they seem to be doing that and taking away the lobs and the threes.
Yeah, so I think it's a spacing thing because, again, like, if Lively is rolling hard, or if Gafford is rolling hard, and the screen defender, in this case a Horford or a Porzingis, is backpedaling in his drop coverage, that's just a huge athletic mismatch. And that's what we saw in the last round, even for Gobert, just like on his heels backpedaling as Gafford just rises up over the top and dunks on his head, right? One of the things that I look at it from the like kind of geometry of the court standpoint, if Derek Jones sets a screen and rolls and Lively's sitting in the dunker spot, the entire above the break area is vacant.
Yeah,
it's vacant, but there's no shooter there.
Right. It's not like they have a Miles Turner.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's really where this has gone wrong. The perfect counter to what Boston's doing is you need one of those guys that's matched up with Porzingis or Horford to be able to successfully pick and pop to the top of the key. Because essentially, if you don't occupy that space with a threat, then it just turns into a cluster F underneath the basket, right? Whereas if you have that spot occupied because Porzingis or Horford is actually on your center, then you're spotting up a guy there, probably Kyrie, and then you have Derek Jones and PJ Washington in the corners where they're actually decent shooters. They're good corner shooters. They're bad above the break shooters. And so by virtue of the entire geometry of the floor is screwed up by that one simple matchup that Tatum is guarding their center. Now, I don't know if you noticed last night, they tried to post up Gafford on him a couple times, and he got a couple buckets. He drew a foul, and then he got a bucket. But, like, unless Gafford was able to, like, consistently punish him there, like on the offensive glass or in the post, you can't play them out of that matchup. And that's the thing is Tatum's done a really, like, Tatum's been bad in so many different ways in this postseason run.
Yeah.
But defensively, he's such a Swiss Army knife, and I think he's held up really well guarding centers. And he's done that in every round, by the way. He did that against Miles Turner. He did that against in the Cavs series. He did it against Jared Allen and then against Evan Mobley. Like, that's been a consistent theme.
It's interesting. I mean, the title of our last show was, "Is Jaylen Brown actually Batman?" And since then, he's won Eastern Conference Finals MVP. It was like him and Porzingis were the MVP of the first game, and then now him and Drew were the MVP of the second game. How do you feel like NBA fans, NBA media, even NBA players will look at the hierarchy of this team if Jaylen wins Finals MVP?
So here's the thing. I think the problem here for Tatum is his jump shot is declining at a pretty rapid rate. I tweeted out this stat this morning. I'm not sure if you saw it, but a Jason Tatum jump shot has been worth just 0.82 points per attempt in this postseason run. It's the 3rd consecutive season where he's been down from the previous year in his playoff shooting. He was 1.1 in 2021, 1.08 in 2022, 0.95 in 2023, 0.82 this year. So he's like steadily tearing down as a jump shooter. So if anything, like, Jaylen Brown's on the rise and Tatum is falling apart a little bit, especially as it pertains to his jump shot. I never thought Tatum was one of the top guys. I thought he was like on that next tier. Maybe the conversation here is Jaylen Brown's just joining that next tier. Maybe that's what it is. And a couple of specific things. He's having the best perimeter defense season of his career. And this is something I started to pick up on the tail end of the season during the regular season. He was like guarding the other team's best player every night and just being physical with ball pressure and doing all that stuff. And then like just little details where he's just been a little bit smarter with his drive pass decisions. And he's got a lightning quick first step. Dude, you remember that move that he hit to kind of ice the game last night against Maxi Kleber at the top of the key? It was like kind of a left-handed hesitation dribble where he paused for a second and then he shot out of a cannon and just toasted Maxi and then got to his left hand on the left side of the rim and got an easy layup. Like that's a little thing that I don't really think he could do a couple years ago. It just one really sharp driving to the left in particular. And so I think that's what it is. I think Tatum's declining a little bit because of his jumper, and I think Jaylen Brown is improving. And I think instead of having one second tier star and a third tier star, now they have 2 second tier stars.
I mean, that might be what that might. It's kind of what you need in the modern NBA. Like I look at the Orlando Magic, right? Like I think those two guys, when they start to improve, like Franz and Paolo, there's going to be the debate who's Batman, who's Robin with those two, and that might be something that you need in the modern NBA.
Yeah, I think it depends on the way you play though, because like, for instance, I feel like Boston has all these good players, but because their brand is we play drive and kick basketball, because of that, they maximize each other.
Yes.
And then you watch Phoenix and they could do that, but they don't do it.
But the crazy thing is Dallas is having the Phoenix issue now.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Well, and that's basically it. Like Dallas's offense functions extremely well as long as they can run their 4-out pick and roll, which they can't. And so now they've turned into this ISO heavy team, and Kyrie's playing like garbage, and Luka, for all the good he's doing on offense, is getting picked apart on the other end. And yeah, like that the other part too, though, is like, and this is something with the concept of team construction. Boston's a 5-out team, right? And that extends beyond just traditional spacing. Like they function like a 5-out team. Like Horford's out and Porzingis are out at the elbows, dribble handoffs popping, a lot of ball and player movement. That's textbook 5-out, right?
Which is great that they're playing that way and they're playing great that way. But sometimes, like you've talked about shell defense before, sometimes, especially when Porzingis is in there, it's almost like the defense could just set and watch. But it's been a little bit different with Porzingis.
It's been a little bit different with Porzingis for sure. Yeah. And I feel like Boston's grown up a lot over the course of this year,
100%.
just in terms of like their shot selection. Like their uglier offensive stretches have been fewer and further between, But I think this is the part that's fascinating in terms of team construction. So 5-out functions best when you have multiple offensive threats, right? So meaning, did the Hurley news just come down?
We were going to talk about that anyway, so let me know.
Darvin Ham is joining the Milwaukee Bucks as the top assistant under Doc Rivers. That's the piece. It was the Woj and I was like, oh, here we go. Anyway, in a 5-out system, you want multiple offensive threats, right? So, like, everyone needs to be able to run action, right? But in a 4-out system, it's more like play finishers. And that's the fascinating part. Like, I was watching a clip from Draymond Green and Kevon Looney this morning, and Kevon Looney's like, Luka needs to get the role players more involved earlier in the game. And it's like, okay, so what is he going to do? Toss the ball to PJ Washington on an island? And is he just going to go to work? Because that's the thing. Dallas is not constructed that way. They don't have multiple threats. It's Kyrie and Luka. Josh Green is a play finisher. Derek Jones Jr. is a play finisher. PJ Washington is a play finisher. Lively, Gafford, all those guys. None of those guys, except for Jaden Hardy, who I've actually been impressed with in this postseason run.
100%.
None of those guys are play starters.
Yeah, I actually predicted there'd be a Jaden Hardy game. It hasn't happened yet, but part of the reason is limited opportunity.
Yeah, and it might happen when they go to Dallas. And Dallas, like, the problems haven't been solvable, in my opinion, for Dallas, but they will play better at home. Like their role players could not play worse than they have to this point.
I actually wouldn't be surprised if Dallas wins both, because I think Kyrie could play considerably better. And look, we've been praising Kyrie for everything he's done in his playoffs, his maturity, all that, but he's definitely been struggling. And as a hooper, Jason, sometimes there's guys that can't guard you, but you don't make them pay, right? You don't make them pay. And you're thinking in your head, Jason, it's not that he's doing so great. Like he's hyped over there. Like, yeah, like I just stopped Jason, but you didn't make him pay. So when you're watching Kyrie play, is it more that he's not making the defense pay like usual, or it's just something that Boston is doing so great and they can repeat this and they can keep doing this throughout the course of the series?
I think that Boston's guarding him well, but so did Minnesota.
Yeah, right.
So did Oklahoma City.
There,
I know.
that one Jalen Brown was the best I've ever seen anybody guard Kyrie. Did you see that play? It was on the
Oh
right
yeah,
hand side.
the one on the
That was
left wing.
ridiculous.
Yeah,
That was
that
ridiculous.
was
Yeah,
really good. And yeah,
yeah.
and like here's the thing, like yeah, like Jalen Brown is joining that like apex tier of perimeter defenders. He's probably the guy you don't want to attack if you can avoid it. The I love the way you broke that down because that's we've all been there. Like if you're an over the top shooter, meaning like, and I shouldn't say like that's all you do, but if that's part of your game, which is part of my game, is part of your game. Like if you're a guy that like when you're ISOing, you are like either driving or you're looking to shoot over the top.
Yeah.
When you get to an over the top shot, there's a certain make or miss element to it. And sometimes you
100%.
do everything right. Like there was a pull up three that Kyrie missed late in the game at the top of the key where he got good separation and it just kind of went in and out. And I remember sitting there thinking, like, I know exactly what Kyrie's thinking right now. He's like, man, what is going on? So it's one of those things where I agree with you. Like, if you were, I think Boston's going to win. I think they're going to win in 5 games.
Really?
But if Dallas were to come back and win the series, this is what it would look like. They'd go home in game 3. The role players would play better. Kyrie would play better. They'd win, right? It would probably be a more comfortable game, like in the 10-point range, right? Game 4, knockdown, drag out fight. Kyrie has a great game. Luka has a great game. They pull it out. Then when you go back to Boston for game 5, Kyrie's more confident in the matchup. Because right now, I think Kyrie shook a little bit, which I think a good portion of that is the booze and all like some of the psychological dynamics taking place. But like, if they can, we saw this before, by the way. I don't know if you remember in the 2016 NBA Finals, Kyrie was bad at the start of that series, and then he had that big game 5 and it just never stopped. And then all of a sudden, like he was just because you and I both know Kyrie's not a guy that really is that dependent on the defense. He's a tough shot maker. So like if he gets that part of his game going and some of the role players get going and Luka, part of it too is like Luka, Jalen Brown and Jason Tatum are attacking Luka every time down the floor. What if Luka kind of starts to quote unquote solve some of their body language to where he can flatten out some of those drives and contain the ball a little bit better? There is a pathway there. I just view it as somewhat unlikely.
Yeah, I think the pathway is Kyrie and Luka just coming out, destroying people, and it opens up the lobs and the 3-pointers, and then they actually got to make 3-pointers, which is more likely at home. From the Mavs perspective, especially like from lineups, Tim Hardaway Jr. is getting no burn. It's funny, like the Tim Hardaway Jr. hate is real. Like he was an above average NBA player at one point. I think he could help them from a shot making perspective, even if you don't like his decision making. Is he somebody they have to look at? What adjustments can the Mavs make for game 3?
So the case there would be there is a value defensively on an island in terms of containing the ball, like a point of attack defender. And then there's a value in rotation, right? So the angle there would be Tim Hardaway's not as good defending on the ball, right? But if we're just going to be in rotation all night anyway, because they're attacking Luka and beating him off the dribble, like Tim Hardaway is a lot closer to a Derrick Jones Jr. in impact in like just sprinting around on the perimeter, closing out to shooters than he is on the ball. So like the way you look at it is like, we need to try to juice up the offense. Let's play more Hardy. Let's play more Tim Hardaway Jr. and basically lean more into the offensive side of things because we're going to be a fly around in rotation type of team to begin with. Right. And again, like I think at this point, you got to try something because until you get the offense broken out, you're not going to get the opportunities to kind of like stagnate Boston in the half court, because that's the other piece of this too, is like they miss a shot and then they're kicking it up to Jalen Brown and he's like starting to kind of probe in the post, like in semi transition before people are even up the court. And then it's just, Boston is just so relentless with their pressure on the rim with how many guys they have that can beat people off the dribble. It's just tough. And I think like slowing the game down starts with scoring, and they just haven't been able to score enough.
And do you think if it gets close, it's advantage Mavs, especially at home, because of how great Kyrie and Luka are as closers? Or you just think the depth of Boston still gives them the advantage in a late close game?
I think a close game is advantage Dallas as long as it's actually a close game. What I mean by that is like there needs to be real pressure. So for instance, in game 2, when it's a 5-point game, that to me doesn't count. Like that that's not enough pressure. Like Jaylen Brown is not feeling on that drive. Like if I smoke this left-handed layup, I'm going to lose us the finals. You know what I mean? So like, I, I, I think if you can actually make these guys sweat, because part of one of my overarching basketball beliefs too is like the wide open catch and shoot jumper when it's super nerve-wracking at the end of a game is a very different shot than it is when you're kind of in the flow of a game in the second quarter. And so if you can turn it into superstar confidence and it's like Kyrie and Luka are confident and Tatum and Brown are not, and who cares about the catch and shoot guys because none of them are making anything at this point, then they're going to be able to pull it out. But I think it would need to be like Dallas is up by 2 with 4 minutes left, and now it's really nerve-wracking. It can't be like Boston has a little bit of a margin to work with.
Yeah, at the end of the day, this is a must-win for the Mavs. I mentioned that 2-0 isn't a death sentence, but when we look at the history of the NBA, 3-0 is.
Oh, it absolutely is. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is the must win. Again, like to your point, the pathway for winning a series when you're down 0-2 is the classic like Cavs versus the Pistons in 07. It's like you drop the first 2, you win the next 2 at home, you bring all that momentum on the road, you steal that game, then you come home and close it out in 6. Like that's the pathway. But yeah, like it's just the other part of this too is we haven't really talked enough about the fact that Boston hasn't shot that well. So for instance, Boston shot really well in the first half of game 1, right? Like that was the Porzingis and Sam Hauser barrage,
Sam Hauser
right?
even had the one where he kept it high. Yeah.
And yeah, the no dip jumper. Yeah. So
Yeah.
like, but if you look back, like they in game 2, 48 jump shots, just 0.75 points per jumper. That's really bad compared to what we expect from Boston. Even in the aggregate, counting the rest of the game in game 1, they were at just 1.07, which is below their season average. So like I would, and then we also have like, here's the thing. We've talked about Tatum. Tatum's flawed. Tatum is going to have a 30-point night in this series where he, is 11 for 19 from the field, right? So like I think that Boston can play better too, and that's kind of the scary part. Last night, that's the issue. Like last night was a bad shooting night for Boston, and it never felt like they were in trouble. And so that's where I would get concerned.
All right, let's shift from the East Coast to the West Coast. Your Los Angeles Lakers, Jason. The only 2 coaching candidates I have heard about is JJ Redick and Hurley. Hurley obviously has the coaching experience. I think the only place JJ has coached is youth basketball in New York City that I hear about. I think he's like coaching youth basketball here. But JJ does have the advantage when it comes to understanding the NBA locker room, right? Who would you like to see be the next coach of the Los Angeles Lakers?
Definitely Dan Hurley. That's what I'm hoping on today. I think Dan
today
Hurley,
is that supposed to come down the pike today?
The report will come down the pike today. That's why I so rudely interrupted your podcast to check that Adrian Wojnarowski drop because well, in fairness, I had double. I had a Woj notification because I have his tweet notifications on, and then Logan Swaim, our head of content at the Volume, is a diehard Lakers fan, and I immediately had a text from him. So I'm like, oh, here we go. But anyway, I really want Dan Hurley for 2 reasons. One, I think he's a really good fit for this particular Lakers roster. And one of the main reasons why is like offensively as a tactician, he's an expert at creating space with non-shooters on the floor. And he basically does that with relentless off-ball action. So it's like there's always 2 phases to Dan Hurley's offense. There's the on-ball element and then there's the off-ball element. He is not a stand and spot up on the weak side kind of guy. He's like, we're running weak side action to occupy defenders. That is what that does is it makes your help defenders think. And if they focus on the ball, the strong side, someone's going to get open on the weak side. So like you can imagine Austin Reeves kind of in the weak side corner coming off of like some sort of like action with where Rui and AD both set a double wide pin down and then like Austin curls the first one and then AD curls or something like that. It just occupies those guys to where if they're not paying attention, then D'Lo and LeBron are going to break open in a 2-man game on the strong side, right? Like that sort of thing. And that I think is a really nice fit with that Laker roster. But the second piece of it is I think that this team desperately needs accountability. I think that ever since the 2021 season in particular, they've been lacking in that department. I thought that they could have actually turned that Denver series into a 6-7 gamer. Could have gone either way had they just been more disciplined. They had these like stretches where like in 2 minutes, they'd give up a 13-0 run. And you'd be like, what are you guys doing? It's just like playing bad basketball. So like Dan Hurley is a psycho competitor who will ride his guys and make sure that they value every possession, lots of attention to detail. And then honestly, if you're looking for a culture builder for post LeBron, can't do better than that. So I want Hurley, but it's like a 50-50 shot. Here's the thing that scares me. If they don't get Hurley, I want them to go after JJ Redick. I think JJ Redick is the kind of guy that like is super raw, obviously, because he doesn't have a lot of coaching experience, but he can learn on the fly. And if there's one team in the NBA that doesn't need as much coaching as others, it's the Lakers, because their players are so high IQ on the floor. For instance, Darvin Ham, the worst kept secret in the league is he doesn't really know what he's doing. Like there's a reason why he interviewed so many times and nobody wanted him. Then when the Lakers finally took him, he was supposed to be like this motivator. And then like AD was like actively pushing behind the scenes to get rid of him. Like that's how done he was with Darvin, right? So if that's the case, and they still were a top 3 offense for the second half of the year, that goes to show you just how much those guys were able to figure out in the fly in terms of like just read and react with each other in a 5-out system. So like if Darvin is that much of an issue in terms of like a tactician, you can let JJ learn on the fly like a little bit here. And I think you can lean into him in the long run as a personality manager, as a guy that's a freak competitor, all those different things. But I'm worried that they're not going to hire JJ if they don't get Hurley. I think they might be going after James Borrego. And one of the reasons why is apparently that's the guy that AD wants. And if that's the guy that AD wants, like I think Borrego's kind of a mediocre option. So I'm hoping that that's not who they settle on, but we'll see. Hopefully it's just Hurley and that makes the problem go away. But Hurley's my number 1. I'd say JJ's my number 2, but I have a feeling it's going to be Hurley if it's not, or it's going to be Borrego if it's not Hurley.
Hurley's obviously a great coach. Are you concerned about the way he's wired to coach, that it might be more a wiring for college basketball and not the NBA, especially when it comes to dealing with people?
I think he'll have to make an adjustment for sure. But let's just go. I was talking about this with Colin in the show that we did after game 1. Let's talk about the best coaches in basketball. Who's number 1? Spoelstra, right?
Oh.
Like I think we all agree. He's kind of an intense dude.
Yep.
Who coaches the Knicks, a really good coach, Tom Thibodeau. He's a pretty intense dude.
But Ty Lue's up there.
Ty Lue's pretty chill.
Yep.
But like I'd say Steve Kerr's kind of in the middle, but like Mike Malone, coach of the Denver Nuggets, kind of an intense dude, right?
Yeah.
What about Greg Popovich with the Spurs? He's kind of an intense dude. Like he's screaming at players in huddles and all those kinds of things. I think it's a fine line. I think as long as you command the respect, which by the way, in a weird way, because the counter example is David Blatt, right? Like everyone's going to be like, oh, remember when David Blatt came over champion from Europe and LeBron just scoffed at him and wanted Ty Lue instead, right? But here's the thing. I think that at the risk of it being kind of xenophobic, I think that LeBron and some of these guys just have more respect for a guy who dominates the college game. Because I think, like, do you remember how LeBron used to always talk about Coach K? Like, that's kind of the way I look at it. So I think LeBron and AD would look at Dan Hurley as a basketball legend. And I think they'd be willing to embrace some of his intensity. And the short version is if you're Dan Hurley, you got to look at these guys in the face and be like, look, man, like you are 2 of the best in the world at what you do. I am one of the best in the world at what I do. Let's get to the promised land together. I am going to coach you hard. I am going to push you. This is going to be collaborative, but this is going to be tough, but we're going to get somewhere you haven't got before, All
right. Last thing before we get out of here, Jason. I was on vacation. I was talking to a Lakers fan, and he believed that the Lakers should part way with LeBron. Is that a common theme among Lakers fans? And do you believe there's any benefit to that at all?
I think it's a fringe group. The vast majority of Laker fans that I talk to, especially the well-meaning ones, they all value what LeBron brings to the table. Here's the thing. Say what you want about LeBron. There's stuff that comes with him. He is at worst a top 10 player in the league still right now. So with that, you lean into the fact that he brings more good to the table than bad. As far as some of the drama that comes to it, it's really this simple. If LeBron were to leave the Lakers this year, the Lakers are very far away from being a good team in the West for a long time.
Yeah.
They don't have the assets to make any sort of additional move. I think they're just in trouble. So like whatever bad comes with LeBron, the good outweighs it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a competitor. I would always want to win a championship. But LeBron being there, I mean, even if they don't, I'm sorry, Jason. Woo.
You're good, man. Wrong pipe.
Yeah. It's still good for business at the end of the day.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's like that. You think Dan Hurley's considering that job if LeBron's not there? Like that's
Right.
part of the appeal. You don't think he wants to be the last dude to coach LeBron in his career? That'd be amazing.
Jason, great stuff. You're always welcome back on the show. Where can we find you? Social media and everywhere else.
On Twitter at _JasonLT, the podcast feed at Hoops Tonight, obviously on YouTube Hoops Tonight as well. But yeah, man, the NBA Finals coverage will be going on for the next week or so. But then when we get into the offseason, we got Summer League, we got free agency, we got player rankings, all that good stuff. This was fun, though, man. I'm looking forward to the next time.
Let's get it done soon. You're always welcome back on the show. Talk soon, Jason.
See you, brother.